Hey guys, hope everyone's doing well. I'm going to be doing a little something different for this video. As you can see, I have a different intro here, just something simple. And I'll also be ending this video with a 10-second moment of silence, just a black screen. I ask that you please stick with me, watch the video all the way through, because it'll all come together. And I promise you it is horror related in a way, and I will be showing some horror DVDs and Blu-rays. But I just want to say, I'm going to be doing this video all in one shot, so it might be kind of sketchy in areas, and I might be babbling and mumbling and stuttering over my words, but I just felt I needed to do this video in one shot. As I said, please stick with me. I promise it'll be worth it in the end, I think anyway. Yesterday I lost someone very close to me. My grandfather, he's 95 years old. He's old, of course, he lived a great life. I was very close with him, and he passed yesterday morning. His family was surrounding him. We were with him for his last breaths. My hand was literally on his chest, feeling for his heartbeat until he no longer had one. And I'm not saying this to be morbid. I'm not saying it to make anybody upset. I'm saying it because it's the reality of the situation. It sucks. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And I know some people might be thinking, okay, he's 95, he lived a great life. As I said, because he truly, truly did. This man lived quite the life. I'm not going to go into details just because, I don't need to. But I can assure you, people talk about their grandparents being the best grandparents. And trust me, I had some of the greatest grandparents I could ever ask for and anybody could ever ask for. As a side note, for a little bit of humor, I saw a meme the other day on Facebook and said something like, if your grandparents didn't stand at the window waving until your car turned down the street, were they even really your grandparents? And it made me laugh because, those were my grandparents. They would both stand at that window, and, my mom would pick me up, or when we go to visit, we'd get in the car to leave, and they'd be waving at us from the window, and we'd literally be all the way down the street, turning the corner, and they'd still be there waving, till the very last second. They were wonderful, wonderful people, and I was blessed. Now, a little bit more backstory, again, people are probably saying he's 95, he lived a long life, and I know there's people losing parents. It's a horrible thing. There's people losing children. Terrible. I understand that. And I'm thankful that he lived a long life, and I'm grateful that I had him as long as I did, I'm a young guy. I'm in my 30s, it's not like I'm an older guy who knew it was coming. And it's funny saying that because, again, being 95 years old, you would think, okay, it's obviously his time, will probably be up soon. But this guy has been through a lot, and I don't know, you're just never really prepared. You're just not ready for it. I have another friend, that I met through YouTube who's dealing with a loss as well. I'm not going to say who, for privacy's sake. So, if you're watching this video, buddy, keep your head up. I'm in the same boat as you. The loss is a terrible thing. It really is. But back to the backstory. 8 years ago, my grandmother passed away, who I was also very close with. And when she passed, we decided we didn't want my grandfather living alone. He was perfectly capable of taking care of himself, but we just didn't want him alone. So I moved in with them at the time. At the time I was a single guy. In fact, it was actually when I first started making YouTube videos, back 8 years ago. Because I remember showing you guys my room and telling you guys how I still had DVDs to put on shelves because I had just moved and whatnot. And that's when I moved in the house with my grandfather because, again, we didn't want him to be alone. And we didn't want to, put him in an assisted living facility. I mean, it's great for some people, but we didn't need to do that. Again, he was perfectly capable of taking care of himself. We just didn't want him alone. We didn't want him, missing my grandmother any more than he needed to. We wanted him to have that companionship. So I moved in. And, I was close with him as it was. I mean, I spent days and days and days with my grandparents as a kid. When my mom worked, I stayed with my grandparents. My grandfather was the one to drive me to my bus stop when, my mom was at work. I had a wonderful mother. I had a single mom for the first 6-7 years of my life who, is absolutely amazing. I'm fortunate to still have her. I love her to death. And when, she had to work, I was with my grandparents, and my grandfather would bring me to the bus stop. He'd he'd take me there after my grandmother made me this big lunch. I had afternoon kindergarten, so I'd go to my grandparents in the morning when my mom went to work. She'd drop me off at my grandparents, and I'd stay there, have lunch, and then my grandfather would bring me to my bus stop and, wait with me until the bus came. And, that's how I spent, my years as a kid. Again, I was always with them in summers, on summer vacations. When my mom didn't have vacation, she'd be at work, 9 to 5. So I'd spend the day with my grandparents, going to the beach, going to the mall, everything you can think of. They're just wonderful people. I just can't say that enough. So, when my grandmother passed, it was really, really hard for me, of course, but we still had my grandfather, and that's kind of where our energy shifted, and specifically mine, since I did move in with him. And, I got even closer with him. We did so much together. It was like we were two bachelors at the time, living together. We'd go to McDonald's. My room would be downstairs. He'd come down, and I'd be in the middle of eating like ramen noodles, and he'd be like, I have a McDonald's card. Let's go get some McDonald's. And completely ignore the fact that I'm sitting there eating my ramen noodles or whatever it was at the time. And, we'd go to McDonald's and we'd sit down, and like clockwork, every time we'd unwrap our cheeseburgers, our meals. He'd have his hot tea, and, he'd look around and he'd kind of look at me and say, oh, hey, you know what? It's cold in here. Let's wrap these up and go eat them at home. And it would happen every time. We'd go and we'd sit, and he'd think that it would be fine. And of course he'd be too cold, and we'd wrap everything up and come back home. So, I have these wonderful memories of him. I really do. He just amazing, amazing memories. Just so many more. I mean, that's just one. But, like I said, we got very close, and of course we did, living together. And, over the next, 8 years, he started to decline slightly, after the first, I lived with him for maybe 2 good years where he was fine. He had all his marbles, as we like to say. Then he started to, experience some symptoms of dementia, just slight here and there. And then gradually over the, the last 6 years or so, I guess, he started to experience a bit more dementia. He was never diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. That's actually what my grandmother passed from. But, he didn't have Alzheimer's, just old age, dementia. And, I ended up, dating my wife, dating the girl who eventually became my wife now. And, we were married. Of course, she moved in, all that. And, we took care of him. For the last couple of years, his dementia really started to worsen a bit. And, not so in the sense where he was unsafe at all, anything like that. Just more, the constant questions, the repetitive, the repetition of the same questions, kind of looking for his family, looking for his wife, which was hard and sad, but still, a very pleasant guy, and at times very much with it, so kind of a strange case. I work with the elderly, for a living, and, being with him, it was a completely different experience when it's your own family member. But anyway, we kept him here as long as we could. It got to the point where we ended up having help at night because he was kind of up at night and this and that. And, I'm really not trying to go into details, so I don't know why I'm going off on a tangent here. But point is, eventually he did have to go in a nursing home, and for the last 9 months or so, he's been in a nursing home, which is literally 30 seconds down the road from our house. We made sure he was close and visited him all the time, all that. And, he was able, to be cared for there. And, just recently, it was just kind of out of nowhere. He took a turn for the worse, and he was rushed to the hospital. He had some pneumonia, a bit of an infection. No one thought he was gonna pull through it, and sure enough, he did. And he came back, and he was back to his old self for a few days this week. And then, unfortunately, yesterday morning we got a call that he took a turn for the worse. And yeah, I mean that's really it. It was pretty quick after that. And as I said, I'm not trying to upset anybody. I'm not trying to make this morbid. Just kind of grieving, I guess. And this is just kind of my way of dealing with it. But getting to my point, I know he was 95, but it doesn't make it any less reason to mourn. I understand there are terrible things that happen, and he was able to live a long life, but it doesn't make it any easier. You're just never really prepared for death. No matter how many times you deal with it, no matter how many people you know that die, you're just never ready. And you just never remember how it felt last time. As much as you think you did, you just don't. When it happens again, it's horrible. So trying to get back on track here, my question for this video is why horror? Why do we like horror? These bad things happen in real life. Death. It's a horrible thing. And meanwhile, we're horror fans and we watch people being killed and we watch death in movies and we cheer and we laugh and we get a kick out of it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing horror. I mean, come on, guys, my name's the Horror Man. I'm not doing that at all. It got me thinking. It's an interesting thing. Like, what really is it that attracts us to horror? Why do we like to see people mutilated? Why do we like to see people die on screen when it's the most horrible thing to happen in real life? I know it's meant to be entertainment, and I know it's meant, we're meant to separate reality from movies. I say this all the time, but what is it that attracts us to horror? Why do we like it? And that is my question for all of you. That's what I ask that you comment below with, or that you post a video response. And tell me, what is it? What is it about horror that you like? Why do you enjoy it so much? I'm not sure I can answer the question, but I'd love to hear from you guys. And also, I ask that you show, 3 to 6 movies and give me a good memory of you watching them. Horror movies only. I want to know. So, for example, for me, I picked a few titles here to just for a little backstory of the Horror Man, I guess. Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. I mentioned this in the past. I used to rent this one a lot as a kid, and just a little fun story. I used to rent this, and for whatever reason, my mother and myself, I told you she was a single mom, and we liked to watch movies when we ate dinner. So we kind of eat dinner in the living room together and on our trays, and we'd put in the movie, and I'd always want to rent this. And my poor mom always hated watching gore while we were eating. She loved horror movies. She loved the movie. It was just while we were eating dinner, it was kind of tough for her to get through. So I remember her sometimes kind of having to turn her head, and meanwhile I'm sitting there while people are getting slashed up, and the guy's screaming, "Get him off of me," and slashing himself up in the bug scene, and just sort of a funny story. It never really bothered me. I don't know what it was that I loved so much about this movie, but I did. I loved it, and it didn't bother me. Another one that I want to talk about just briefly is Halloween 2. It's another movie that I remember watching as a kid. I remember always feeling so bad about Ben Tramer, Ben Tramer's death in this one, when he gets hit with the car. I don't know why it bothered me as a kid. I remember thinking I felt so sad for him that happened. All the other people that get killed, and for some reason it was Ben Tramer that bothered me. I just felt bad. The poor guy was just crossing the street and just gets leveled. Always got to me. Another one here, Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. I watched this one all the time as a kid, and for whatever reason, this one really creeped me out. That opening scene where he has kind of the the mask on the table, and then when he slams that door, for some reason, that used to scare the hell out of me, and I have no idea why. I mean, I watched the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and every other movie you can think of, but for some reason, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 scared the crap out of me as a kid. This is the movie that I would picture when someone mentioned the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Leatherface. I always pictured part 3. Also, I wanted to show these here all together for a reason, because these are 3 movies, for whatever reason, that I remember watching at my grandfather's house. It's the house that I still live in now, but I remember specifically watching these here with my grandfather. Puppet Master 2, Puppet Master 4, and The Guardian. Don't ask me why, but for whatever reason, these movies always remind me of this house. And as I said, I've lived here 8 years now, but these movies remind me of being a kid here. I remember watching, Puppet Master 2 and The Guardian in my den, in the upstairs den. Again, I don't know. There's no specific backstory to this portion of it. I just remember watching those 2 movies in that room. In Puppet Master 4, I remember specifically, my mom stopping at the video store before dropping me off at my grandparents one day. And, I wanted to pick out a movie to watch to bring to my grandparents, and I picked out Puppet Master 4. And I remember it being rainy here, and in the movie, there's that big rainstorm scene, and I remember thinking it was pretty cool. Like, I remember looking out the window and seeing it pouring, and then watching the movie and that pouring scene. I don't know. I don't even know if this video will interest you guys. I just thought it'd be cool to kind of share some some stories of being a childhood horror fan, and I thought it'd be interesting for you guys to share some stories as well. So if you guys want to comment below, let me know some horror memories. Let me know why it is that you like horror. And please, I also encourage you to post a video response. You know, show some titles, talk about some of your favorite horror movies growing up, and not necessarily your favorite, but some horror movies like this, where you have certain memories for whatever reason. Just share them, you know, kind of a more of a getting to know you. You know, this is a great community, guys, and I appreciate you watching this video and listen to me ramble on, but I just felt like it was something I wanted to do, and I felt like it was important. You know, why horror? I mean, why? Why do we like to watch these terrible things? And, you know, by any means, I am not going to stop watching horror movies. You know, tragic things happen. You know, death occurs. It sucks. It's a horrible thing. But for whatever reason, you know, we love seeing it on screen. We love seeing the fake version of it, I guess. And it's also funny to me, you know, people watch horror movies and, you know, people get killed off left and right in horror films, and then there's some people who see like an animal get hurt in a movie and they're like, oh, I can't watch that. And you know, it's just funny how some people's sentimentality is. You know, they don't want to see an animal harmed on, you know, in a movie, even though that's also fake, but they don't mind seeing, you know, a person being brutally murdered. Always an interesting thing to me as well. One last thing too, you know, with everything I've gone through in the last few days, it just sort of makes you realize, it makes you prioritize things. It really puts things into perspective. You know, as movie collectors and horror fans, you know, there are things that we worry about and stress about that are just so stupid. You know, like, oh, gee, my slipcase came in damaged from Amazon. I got to send it back and get another one, or whatever. You know, there's a puncture in my DVD case, or whatever it is, or, you know, or I didn't get the newest edition that has a brand new featurette. I gotta, you know, upgrade. Don't get me wrong, I do all these things. I do. I'm a collector. I know, but it really puts things into perspective, because, you know, I can care less about any of that right now, and I'm sure, unfortunately, I'll start to get in that phase again. But for now, you know, I'm just, there are bigger things. You know, enjoy life, enjoy the people you love, be with them. And finally, you know, I'm not a religious guy. I've never been a religious guy, but I have to say, if there's any time to be religious, it's times like these, because, you know, I picture my grandfather with my grandmother. You know, they were together 50 years. I picture them together now. I picture him with his family members that passed before him. I picture him with all his old pets that died. And I picture him here with me right now and forever. Thanks for watching, guys.